Good afternoon and welcome to this Planning Committee meeting being held on Wednesday, the 10th of November 2021. This meeting is being held remotely via Microsoft Teams due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19. The meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals present and or speaking at the Planning Committee will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. You will notice already that my image is not on the screen. That's because I'm having difficulties at the moment. My camera on my computer is not working, but we will continue as normal. Unfortunately, I said you won't see my charming face. Right, but further to that, and due to restrictions in relation to COVID-19, Planning Committee site meetings have been suspended, and this meeting will not be open to the press and general public. However, interested parties may make a request to attend remotely and speak in regard to any item on this agenda. Votes for this meeting will be taken by Microsoft Forms, and when a vote is required, the form will appear, and then members will be asked to click on the yes, no, or abstain, and then click on the submit button. I now carry out a roll call for attendance, and please can you announce yourself as present when I call out your name. Councillor Adams.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Andrews.
Present, Chair.
We've had an apology from Councillor Bevan. Councillor Mike Davis.
Present.
Councillor Dix.
Present.
Councillor Fussell. We've received an apology there. Councillor Goff. Also an apology. Councillor Harding.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Higgs.
Present.
Councillor Hussey.
Present.
Councillor Miles. Councillor Brenda Miles. I think we had an apology through from her. That's correct, Rebecca, is it?
Yes, Chair. Apologies and comes to Miles.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Ridgewell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Simmons. There's also an apology there. Councillor Taylor.
Present, Chair.
And myself, I'm present, but not visually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 members present, and we have 5 apologies. So we are quorate, so we can continue. Thank you for confirming your attendance. Please can I remind attendees that if they lose connection during the meeting, please make every attempt to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as the meeting is quorate. Committee services are on hand and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. We've gone through the apologies for absence, and we can now move on, I believe, to declarations of interest. That's item 2. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. So could you indicate if you have a declaration to make? Thank you, members. There's no indication, so there are no declarations. So now we can move on to agenda item 3, which is the Planning Committee meeting of the 13th of October 2021, which is pages 1 and 3 of your agenda. We'll go through them for accuracy. That's page 1, page 2, and page 3. Will somebody move?
Move that, Chair.
Thank you. And second?
Second, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, you'll now see a pop-up screen on the screen in front of you. Please vote yes, no, or abstain, and then submit. Committee services will confirm the vote.
Yes, Chair, it's 11 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions, / unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're going to make an adjustment to the agenda. We're going to reverse it just to ensure that we can accommodate, first of all, our guests. So we're going to start off with agenda item 6, then agenda item 5, and then finally agenda item 4. We're taking this in order because I understand that Mr. Cowan James has got an urgent appointment at the end of this meeting, and we'd like to accommodate him for that. So we're taking his 2 items first. So this is agenda item 6, and it's application 21/0574 full. It's the application at the Ross Bedworth Road, Caerphilly, pages 57 to 72 on your agenda, and the case officer is Cowan Powell. Thank you, Cowan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share the presentation for a moment. Right, okay, let me just click in there and on that one. Okay, so this is an application for the development at the Ross on Bedworth Road in Caerphilly. And the application is for the erection of 31 affordable dwellings on the application site, which is a mixture of 16 houses and 15 apartments. So this is the application site here, marked in red on the plan, with access off Bedworth Road. And this is sort of midway down Bedworth Road, and this is the 7-Eleven shop on Bedworth Road here. So if I move on to the next plan, sorry, let's skip one. So this is the site layout, and as you can see, we have, as I say, the 16 houses on the main part of the site here, and an apartment block of 15 apartments at the northern part of the site here. So we have a number of house types. Oh, sorry, this is flicking through and it shouldn't be. Hang on a second. So we have a house type A1, which is a 3-bed, 5-person dwelling. A B1, which is a 2-bed, 4-person dwelling. A B2, which is a 2-bed, 4-person dwelling again. And then a C1, which is a 4-bed, 7-person dwelling. And then we have the apartment buildings, which is as you can see there, is a 3-story building situated at the northern end of the site. That's the side elevations and rear elevation, and these are the footprints. So we have the one style of flat here in the yellow, and the other side style then in the pink there. Okay, so this is a 2-bedder here. So this is the entrance to the site off Bedworth Road. As I say, this is the 7-Eleven shop on the right-hand side, access into the site here. This is taken from the lane to the south of the site, looking towards Hazel Grove in the north, and the application site in the middle ground. This is the entrance gate into the existing site, which was previously used as an industrial estate. This is looking from Hazel Grove towards the south, towards the site from where the residential properties are, and this is slightly further afield in that direction. I'll come back to that plan in a second, okay? This is a brownfield site within the settlement limits and was formerly used as industrial estate, as I previously referred to. So the principle of development is in accordance with the policies in the local development plan. The layout and design of the dwellings is considered to be acceptable in terms of design and placemaking. However, there are highways concerns with regard to the car parking provision on site and the layout of the site in terms of whether the site can be adopted moving forward. In terms of the car parking provision, if I go back to the site layout plan for a second. You'll notice that each of the dwellings has car parking on plot. So we have 2 parking spaces for these ones, and again, parking spaces for these ones in the middle at the back here, and parking there, a parking across the front here, same on the back for these dwellings, and then we have a communal area for car parking for the apartment block on the northern part of the site. The application was submitted with a transport note which suggests that the site is sustainably located and therefore should secure a 1 parking space reduction per unit across the site. So that means that any sort of 3-bed dwelling would provide 2 parking spaces. Any 4-bed would provide two parking spaces, which is one less than those required in the SPG, and the 2-bedroom apartments would only require 1 parking space rather than the 2 that's set out in the SPG. On that basis, the parking level across the site is 16 spaces less than what would normally be required on a site. But given its suggested sustainable credentials, that 16 spaces reduction would be in accordance with the SPG. Now, our highways colleagues have assessed the application, and in accordance with the measures set out in the SPG, it's not considered to be sustainable, and they have raised an objection in that regard. However, as a planning department, we've assessed the application having regard for the SPG, but also having regard for the more up-to-date guidance contained in Planning Policy Wales and Future Wales, which is leading towards a sort of a major reduction in the provision of car parking in housing developments, and a reduction in the movement of vehicles or private vehicles as part of development, and towards the use of public transport. In that regard, the parking levels as set out in SPGs should be seen now as being maximum levels as opposed to minimum levels. And having regard for what is considered in planning terms to be the sustainable location of the site, we feel that a reduction in car parking should be permitted. If I come to the final plan, which I glossed over slightly earlier, this is what's called a walking isochrone, which shows the site marked by the red dot in the middle here. And you will see 3 different colours of area here, which show what areas can be reached within certain times for a walking perspective. So the lighter colour here is a 5-minute walking distance. This slightly darker colour is then 10, then we're up to 15, and then we're up to 20 minutes. So as you can see, it might be difficult to show on here, but effectively, Caerphilly train station is in this location here. So within 15 minutes of this site, walking distance-wise, you can reach all of Caerphilly town centre, the main transport hub for Caerphilly, and also we have Morrison's supermarket within a 5 to 10 minute walk of the site, and Tesco's on Gallagher Retail Park within a 10-minute walking distance of the application site. So on that basis, as a planning department, we feel the site is sustainably located. Therefore, it should benefit from a reduced car parking level. And on that basis, we are recommending approval. The application be deferred to allow us to enter into Section 106 for the provision of the affordable housing, and slight amendment to what's said in the recommendation of the report, that we then be allowed to determine to issue a consent subject to the agreement being entered into under satisfactory terms.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Now we're going to move on to the speakers tonight. The first presentation is from Councillor James Pritchard. Are you there, Councillor Pritchard? Yes, he's on the screen. Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. I'm sure you know the procedure. You're allowed 5 minutes to present your case. I understand that you are speaking in support of the application. That's what I've got down here on my notes. You can commence your presentation whenever you wish. You're muted at the moment.
There we go.
There we are.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thanks, members, for the opportunity of addressing the committee as a local ward member. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Councillor Shane Cook after engaging with local residents over the prior 8 months. Just to add some context, members, on the 29th of March this year, myself and my ward colleague met with LRM developers to field a series of questions to them from residents. We were informed that 60 residents had been leafleted at the time. The report indicates there were no observations from residents through the council consultation, but LRM developments have received some feedback which is contained in the report. Many members would have heard myself and my ward colleague over the years championing the need to build more affordable housing, We're certainly not about to reverse our long-held view right now. New build council housing and affordable homes via a registered social landlord are required in order to tackle unaffordability, particularly for younger generations and more acutely in the Caerphilly Basin. With 5,000 people on the waiting list, we would argue against simply refusing affordable housing applications out of sight. We've always offered a view on the material considerations of the planning application. Members of the committee of the last term may remember us strongly objecting to Virginia Park, which is opposite this application. That was for an unaffordable greenfield site. This application is proposed on an unaffordable brownfield site, so very different. We do, however, have to raise a few points regarding the access and privacy grounds. The access to the nearby Virginia Grove site onto Bedworth Road is fraught with problems. Turning right can be very difficult, and this is not helped by illegal parking. The proposed access is also onto Bedworth Road. There's a bus stop to the left, which could obscure the vision. We note the views of residents in Hazel Grove and ask the committee to consider these points. We note there's an existing use on the proposed site, which naturally results in vehicle movements, particularly of a more engineering nature. So the removal of these movements needs to be considered when accessing the application. However, speaking from experience as a local ward councillor, access and parking are always issues that are raised. We would ask members of the committee to strongly consider the views of the Transport Engineering Manager. The Transportation Engineering Manager does not support the application as specified by Carwyn Powell, given that there's a shortfall of 16 car parking spaces when assessed against the car parking guidance. Due to the nature of this area, car parking and health and safety problems cannot be underestimated. We would therefore wish to support the application, subject to an amendment whereby the car parking shortfall is eliminated. We believe this would be a good way of proceeding when taking all points into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Obviously, you didn't need timing, well within your time. We can now move on to the presentation from Mr. Jones, who is the agent for the developer. Mr. Jones, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Your time starts whenever you're ready, and you can commence if you wish.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. My name is Rhys Jones of LRM Planning, and I am agent to Harmony Homes, the applicants for this proposal, which proposes 31 new affordable homes, access and associated works on the Horse, a small industrial estate off Bedworth Road on the outskirts of Caerphilly town centre. Members have before them a detailed report which sets out all of the relevant planning considerations, providing a comprehensive and balanced appraisal as to why this application should be approved. It is therefore not necessary for me to repeat all these arguments, which are suitably addressed within the report. Instead, I only wish to draw members' attention to a few key matters, which I hope will aid your positive consideration of the application. The site, which is currently a small industrial estate, constitutes previously developed land comprising light industrial units in various states of repair. Located within the identified settlement boundary for Caerphilly and within an established residential area, the site is situated with close proximity to public transport and a range of local facilities. The principle of the proposal, in land use policy terms, is unquestionably in full accordance with key placemaking and sustainability objectives set out within both Planning Policy Wales and the Development Plan. The Transportation Engineering Manager has raised concerns over the amount of car parking proposed. Car parking is provided in line with maximum standards set out within the SPG. 43 residential parking spaces and an additional 6 visitor parking spaces for the 31 dwelling proposed is policy compliant. The site has good access to frequent bus routes that operate throughout the day along Bedworth Road. It is also within walking distance of Caerphilly town centre, which hosts a range of amenities. Therefore, it occupies a highly sustainable location. It should be borne in mind that reduced car parking provision in sustainable locations is a principle strongly advocated in national policy. The proposed car parking standards do not take into account the tenure of the proposed dwellings, with significant evidence demonstrating that affordable housing is characterised by lower car ownership rates than private housing, which also justifies a further reduction in parking provision. Despite this, noting the comments of the Transportation Engineering Manager, the applicant is willing to provide 25% of the dwellings with electric vehicle charging points, which is over and above policy requirements. It is noted that Highways have questioned the need for the proposed build-out at the site access and egress. Whilst this is at odds with their original advice, the applicant has agreed to review the need for these works through the technical approval process, thereby addressing the issue that they have raised. Regarding amenity and privacy, I would like to reassure both members and residents alike that the scheme before you has been properly considered and the scheme respects the established separation and privacy distances. There are no unacceptable impacts in this regard. The scheme proposes the delivery of 31 much-needed affordable homes, which will help towards meeting the needs of the local community, exceeding minimum policy requirements. To conclude, the application before you is a robust and carefully considered proposal that seeks to provide affordable housing on a sustainable brownfield site. All relevant technical issues have been addressed, and the proposal accords with key principles of a local and national policy. The conclusion of the officer's report is a balanced assessment that has been reached after careful consideration. If you as members agree with the officer's recommendation, then much needed affordable homes will be provided for the local community. We therefore respectfully encourage members to follow the officer's recommendation and grant approval for this development. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Now, members, the debate is open to you for questions or clarity. Can I just ask before we start from Carwyn Powell? You mentioned the number of vehicle parking spaces per house. Did you suggest that for a four-bedroom house it would be 3 vehicles?
No, Councillor. The SPG requires maximum levels of car parking, which are for a one-bedroom property would be 1 space. For the 2 bedrooms, it would be 2. For the 3, it's 3. But a 4, it's only 3 as well. That's what the SPG requires. So 3 is the maximum number we would require for any individual dwelling. So of course, if we allow a 1 space reduction, a 3-bed property would provide 2 parking spaces, and so would a 4-bed property as well.
I see. And in terms of on-street parking for visitors, I was looking at the design of the state. Is there adequate space for that as well?
Visitor parking is accounted for in the parking provision that's on the site, as just suggested by the agent. There would be limited space for parking on street, but that is in accordance with national guidance, which is trying to discourage people from using the private motor vehicles. So that would be in line with national guidance effectively. Okay,
thank you, Mr. Powell. Now I've got 2 people with their hands up. That's Councillor Nigel Dix and then Councillor Mike Adams. Councillor Dix, you first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at the issue seems to be, I'm delighted that finally we're seeing more applications coming through on brownfield sites rather than officers recommending greenfield sites. So that's something I will always support. Obviously, to make a brownfield site work, it's not going to be like a blank sheet of paper like a greenfield site can be. You have to sort of you're dealing with the sort of enclosed area. You have to make it work. In other words, as far as the parking situation going forward, if we're all to believe what we're told, you know, the combustion engine's at its day, and we're all going to be going to electric anyway, and that will mean in reality that very few people will be able to afford cars because they'll be priced off the roads. So there's going to be lots of people in this country who once owned a car in the distant past and won't in the future because they'll be forced onto public transport for one way or the other for the affordability of an electric car. I'm also delighted to see they've got a charging point in there, but charging points are being suggested, which is another problem with electric cars. If you live in a terraced house like I live, putting the charging point would be mission impossible. I'd have to go and park up in the car park about a mile from me and then walk up and walk back and get a charge if I was lucky enough to have a space that night to charge the car. But there we are. But I'm delighted that this site, we're looking at that, and I have no issue with the reduction in parking spaces. And I'm sure that Councillor Pritchard and Councillor Cook will be doing their bit by getting rid of their cars and going on taking public transport like everybody else will in the future. I'm sure they'll be delighted to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dix. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, I should be thanking Councillor Dix as well for making some very, very interesting points. And at least 90% of them are supportable, I believe. On the issue of the number of charging points, I think Mr. Jones said 25. Now, question is, are these going to be just randomly fitted during build, or when they're occupied with people with electric cars who need a charging point? And how are they going to be spaced around the total of 31 bills or 31 homes being needed? But it's good that they are being put in there, hopefully at the beginning of the appropriate housing. The other point for Mr. Jones is, what about sustainable heating? Now, we're told by whatever date it is that gas boilers shouldn't be being purchased to go into the heating homes, and they should be something like an air source, perhaps even a ground source heat pump. That will be very interesting. And how are they being incorporated into this? As far as the isotherm for walking distances, that's excellent. But for those with a car, I believe this is looks as if it's a 90-degree junction. And I'm having issues in Pollenfrife with some of the ways that our double yellow lines are being abused on such junctions. So hopefully vision displays will be really adequate for people coming out of just another one of these 90-degree junctions. I'm sure there are a load of questions other members would love to ask, but affordable housing, hurrah, hurrah. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure you're indicated coming, Cowan. I'd like just to put one other point as well, which you'll need to answer, just for clarification in terms of the fact that the Highways Department said that they would not be adopting this site on completion. What is the form, the issues there?
Yeah, I think you touched on it earlier, Councillor. It's in terms of the pavements within the development and the availability of space on pavements for people to park vehicles. Now, this development is, and as Councillor Dix has referred to, it's a previously developed site. It's quite a constrained site. To make it viable in planning terms or in development terms, you have to try and get a level of housing which makes a site viable for development. In that regard, the design is in accordance with national guidance in terms of manual for streets, I'm led to believe, but not necessarily to a standard that our Highways Department would necessarily want to adopt. That is an issue for the developers. They could go ahead and develop the site and then maintain it themselves in the future. So that would effectively be a private issue between the two parties, as far as we are concerned, as a planning department. Having said that, it's still within the gift of the developers to, make changes within the broad parameters of the layout to make it more acceptable to our Highways Department, and perhaps offer it up for adoption at a later stage, and iron out those issues that may cause concern for our colleagues at the moment. But from a planning perspective, having regard for the sort of viability of the development, and from a placemaking perspective, the layout is considered to be acceptable, and as I've said, is in accordance with Manual for Streets, which is the overarching highways guidance for this type of development.
So in terms of the concerns that are being raised by Councillor Pritchard, there's still some sort of flexibility that could be there in order to maybe find a few additional spaces?
I don't think you would be able to find any additional car parking spaces, but you may well be able to provide additional pavements within the development. Mm-hmm. To provide the extra 16 car parking spaces, you're talking about, at 2.5 meters wide. You're talking a significant amount of space there, and you're talking probably losing 3 to 4 dwellings on the site, which would make it unviable moving forward. So, the scheme either stands or falls on its current layout, essentially. And from a planning perspective, we consider that it does stand up, and that's why we recommended approval of it. you know, I don't think it would be reasonable to try and refuse the application on the basis that we ought to go back and ask them to provide those extra 16 parking spaces. It would effectively be a totally different development.
Yeah. Well, houses are going to always be, when they're built, they're going to be there for a long time, and we are talking about major changes in the next 10 and 20 years in terms of vehicles, and the points highlighted by Councillor Dix are certainly ones that we should take note of, I think. Okay, we move on now. I've got Councillor John Taylor, and I think then Councillor Dix, you want to come back in? Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. You touched on the thing I was going to ask about, which was the Highways Department not going to adopt this. So would that make it essentially a private drive?
Yes, it would. Yes, yeah.
Because there can be problems with such developments, particularly when things happen, and sometimes there's a site in my own ward which is technically a private drive, and there have been problems with things like rubbish and tipping that our people were not able to properly address, because obviously it was on private land, not on the public highway. So there could be issues for that. But that doesn't stop me. You know, it doesn't mean to say I'm against this development. And it's Bedwas Road is a major bus route. There are several bus routes that use that area. You're talking of the Graigaracha to Caerphilly route, the Bargoed to Newport routes go through there. So there well, except at the moment where the buses are having a bit of a problem and they're getting cancelled right, left, and centre. There's normally buses, I would say, roughly every 10 minutes, quarter of an hour along Bedwas Road there. So, but there could be problems with the private drive, depending on things that can happen in the future. So people should be aware of that problem or potential problem.
Could you just come back in on that then, Carwyn, and give us some explanation as to, so generally, what is the format in terms of ownership or responsibility in terms of the highway situation then?
Yeah, I mean, the comfort we have here is that this is a housing association development, and they would not only build the houses, but they also then manage them moving forward, and therefore manage the whole site. So if there are issues such as tipping or fly tipping of waste and things like that, then we would take that up directly with the housing association, and they would be able to manage the site in a way that a property developer, as we all know, may have the tendency to sort of develop the site and then move on, and then the site's forgotten. Well, in this instance, because they will have tenants on the site, the housing association would be in their interest to actually make sure that it is managed to an effective level to make sure that there aren't those sort of issues.
Thanks, Carwyn.
If I could come back there, Chair.
Oh, sorry, yes, no problem, John. Yes, come back in.
It's the same housing association that has the development in my ward that has, in the past, from time to time, caused those problems because management isn't always as good as it should be. But there we are. That doesn't mean to say this development shouldn't go ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Dix, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just basically on the same as Councillor Taylor, really. I just wanted to know what the practical implications would be. What does that actually mean to the potential tenants of these properties if the highway is not adopted? There are building sites that are sort of not adopted, and the roadway's never put in. They just put down the sort of the basic road structure, and they never put the top coat on. You put the gullies in, they put the curbs in, and nothing's up to the water line, so the water can't get away. You got drainage. What agency will we have to make sure that that's all done properly, and then it's not just sort of left like some of the sites in Blackwood are, just waiting for, I don't know, to come and tarmac them in the future someday, to finish them off. That's what the concern I got, really, and what's the practical implications.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That comes down to the effective enforcement of the conditions on the consent, effectively. The consent says that they have to provide the access to serve the dwellings, and therefore they have to provide it to our satisfaction. Equally so, as you know, affordable housing is grant funded by the council as well, and the likelihood is that that grant will be withheld by our housing department until such time as they are satisfied that the development is satisfactorily completed. equally so, Welsh Government provides the grant funding as well, and they won't release grant funding until such time as development is signed off by the local authority in whatever format that is, to an acceptable standard. So there are financial penalties on the developers in this instance for not doing it, whereas, you know, a volume builder, they are self-financed at the end of the day, and you know, they can afford to take that risk. But in this instance, we are, you know, satisfied that because it's a housing association, those controls are in place through other avenues, really.
Okay, thank you, Carwyn.
Thanks for that, Carwyn. It's reassuring to know, because they, you know, it's not a no for people to play fast and loose with stuff. You know what I mean? Once they get planning, yeah, we got to make sure we got that agency to take action to make sure that it's finished properly. That's all I was concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dix. Councillor John Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm going to echo what everybody else has been saying. I think I'm delighted with this development. You know, much needed affordable housing in the centre of one of our key communities. It's something that really we have to support. The issue of car parking is a matter of concern, clearly, and I think we all share that. However, I think the fact of the matter, from my perspective, is that we need to change, and compromise is the issue. And I do feel a little bit concerned that, in a way, we're not adopting a whole council approach towards this, because, you know, whilst our highways colleagues, you know, have legitimate reasons currently for saying that they can't do X and Y, and maybe not even adopt the site, ultimately there are going to be so many of these sites coming on board that we're going to have to change. And I think we're all talking about change taking place. I think it's time to flag up that as a whole authority approach, we can't really work in silos and say this won't happen because this rule says this. We have to look at it differently, and this is an example of that. So I'd like to think that, coming back to Carwyn's point, at some future date there'll be an acknowledgement that the site could be adopted, and we can go ahead with that. But hopefully in the future, not at future dates, we will make these decisions and get these things sorted out at the very beginning. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, there's no further indication. I don't know what members' wishes are in terms of this application. Okay. Councillor Adams, you've got your hand up yet?
Yeah, I did ask a question earlier about sustainable heating and whether or not there's any proposals to go forward towards what we expect people to be kept warm by in the future. Okay,
Carwyn.
Yeah, whilst not explicitly said in this application, I am aware that Harmony Homes, which is part of United Welsh are moving towards what is called off-gas and EPC rating A. So you would have seen an EPC rating on your electrical equipment. Rating A is the highest rating, so that's the most heat efficient. So moving forward, all of United Welsh housing stock will be of that rating and will be off gas, so they won't have any gas going to the houses at all. So that isn't necessarily a matter covered under the planning legislation, it's covered under the building regulations. But that is certainly something I'm aware that United Welsh will be doing moving forward, and in that regard these houses will probably be of the highest standards given the current legislation in force, basically.
And be used as a model for the future and for when they then go into the rest of their existing stock, no doubt, in however many years.
As I understand it, well, I know for certain that United Welsh have recently opened a factory on Pontygwyniad Road where they will be building all of their new, what are called modern methods of construction dwellings, effectively. So that's non-traditional bricks and mortar. So there'll be timber frame, or they'll be cross-laminated timber structures, which will then be sort of clad in sustainable materials as well. So there'll be embedded carbon in the materials they use, and less carbon footprint for those dwellings moving forward. So there'll be less heat loss, less carbon loss in the first place.
Yeah.
So from a sustainability perspective, the housing associations led by the Welsh Government are ahead of the game on this matter, really. And it's for the private developers to catch up in that regard, but certainly this development would be fully compliant with regard to sustainability issues.
Thanks very much, Carwyn. If there's, I'm sure
one more hand up,
department can view this recording for our comments.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Ridgewell, you've still got your hand up. Is that an old hand? It's taken down. Right.
Yeah, apologies, Chair, legacy hand, yeah.
Okay, legacy hand. Well, there's no more further indication from members. Carwyn Powell, you've come.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to clarify before members make a decision.
Yeah.
When the agent referred to the electric charging point, they suggested 25%, not 25 units. Now, that is a big difference between 25% and 25 units on a 31 dwelling site, don't get me wrong. However, Welsh Government guidance doesn't set in any requirements, so 25% is actually more than they have to provide.
Right.
We have discussed this with them outside of this sort of regime, and they've said, yeah, we're happy to make provision for 25%, and I would commend that as an additional condition on the consent for members. So the recommendation would be for approval, subject to a section 106 and an additional condition to secure the electric charging points.
Hopefully there'll be
thanks, Carwyn.
affluent.
I hope that's not in one little section of the development and they spread out.
Yeah. So we're likely to get quite affluent occupiers of these dwellings by the look of it. At least that's the hope. Anyway, we haven't got any further indication from members. So I'm looking for somebody to move either for or against this application.
I'm certainly willing to move the officer's recommendation, and with all of the comments from members so far taken into account.
Yeah. Is that seconded?
Happy to second that, Chair.
Yeah, I think that tonight, well, before we go to the vote on it, Councillor Pritchard is obviously flagged up these concerns, but I think as a result of the discussions we've had tonight on the car parking issue and the way that we're developing in future, this is the way in which we're going to be trying to overcome those problems. Parking is always a problem wherever you are. But in terms of sustainability of this development and the proximity to all the services, I think that this is going to have to be the way forward for us. So it's been moved and seconded. I'm now going to put it to the vote. So you'll see before you the voting slip when it flags up. There it is. So can you indicate yes, no, or abstain, and then submit your vote? So all those in favour say yes, if you're against, no, and an abstention if necessary. Rebecca, can you confirm the vote when it's completed?
Yes, Chair, just give us 1 moment. We'll check on now for you. Thank you. Chair, the vote's in order. /11 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions, so that's unanimous and carried, Chair.
Okay, that's of course subject to all the conditions and the completion of the 106 agreement, isn't it? Okay, thank you very much, members. We're now going to move on to agenda item 5, which is application number 18/1077 full. Is at Liz Eve Hall, Crescent Road, Caerphilly. And once again, it's Carwyn Powell, and we're referring to pages 43 to 56 on the agenda. Carwyn Powell, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just share the presentation now.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, this is an application for the property at Llys Ifo, Crescent Road, Caerphilly, and the application property, our site is identified in the red line boundary here. For those who know the area, this is Crescent Road, which is at the back of Caerphilly Castle. Caerphilly Castle is up in this sort of area here. This is part of the moat for the castle here. We have Ysgol Gyfun Gymraeg Caerphilly here. And then the town centre is over in this direction over here. So we have a development of, and there's a little mistake in my report, it's a 4-storey building, okay, containing 29 units, which is 15 1-bed flats and 14 2-bed flats, together with a retail unit on the corner at the front of the building here, and a driver's rest area here in the back. And then we have a scooter store in the middle here and a bin store here as well. The application was advertised, and one objection was received. Those objections are addressed in the report. If I go through the plans of the development, so sorry, if I go back to the previous one here. So this is the ground floor of the property. As I say, you've got some apartments here, then you've got the retail and other uses here, and then you've got the car parking at the rear of the site. You will notice this area here, which sticks out from the back of the property. That is land which is currently in the ownership of the council and forms part of the Crescent Road car park. It's the area where there were formerly recycling bins situated there. And because of the economic benefits brought about by the retail unit here and the driver's rest area here, I'll come on to that in more detail later on. We're looking at a deal where we would sort of provide this area of land to the developers so they can provide policy compliant car parking for the development. So moving forward to the upper floors of the building, so we have this is the layout of the first and second floor of the property, and then this is the layout of the third floor or the fourth story. Here are the elevations of the property. So this is the elevation facing onto Crescent Road. This is the elevation facing the access road to Crescent Road car park. Then we have the rear elevation, and then this is the other side elevation facing the properties to the south. In terms of how that appears in the street view, we have the application site here. Then we have the Thomas Carroll office building adjacent to it, and then we have the listed church on the junction of Claude Road and Crescent Road, which is to the south of the site here. And as you can see, the application property is stepped down from the ridge heights of the adjacent properties along the street and along with the slope in the street itself. So this is a photograph of the existing building on the site. As you can see, it's a nondescript sort of 60s office building with a flat roof. We have the office building adjacent here, and then this is the listed church here, which is actually a 1920s brick building of unusual design, I will say, but it is what it is. That's the access to the car park there. This is the rear of the building, and this area here is the area which will be leased or sold to the developers to provide the car parking area. As you can see, it's not currently used for car parking, and off on this area here there are recycling bins which were for public use but are no longer in use. So the application was considered in terms of the design of the building and in terms of the highways impact. As I've said previously, the area of the car park is being considered to provide policy compliant car parking. This site is considered both by us and the Highways Department in this instance to be a sustainable location, being 200 metres from the town centre, in which case they do secure a reduction in the number of car parking spaces required in accordance with the SPG. So the car parking level is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the design of the building, as previously seen, it fits in with the street scene in terms of its scale and massing. The design of the building is considered to be contemporary but acceptable in its own regard. The objections from residents in terms of loss of view and other issues don't have any merit in planning terms and wouldn't warrant refusing the application. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Carwyn. Members, have you got any comments, questions? Councillor Dix?
Yeah, I was just thinking, Carwyn, with my sustainability head on, I was thinking they're looking to purchase or lease a piece of land off us. Is there any way that we can ask them to put an electric charging point in there?
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, again, it's an issue that we've discussed with the developers, and in this instance, they've agreed to 50% of the units to have, or the parking spaces to have electric charging points, or at least cabling for the provision of car charging points. As you can see on this one, it's not got a parking space per unit. It's got, I think, it was something in the region of 16 parking spaces. Yeah. So cabling would be provided so that charging points can be fitted in the future on that car parking. From my perspective, that's far more important, because as you've said yourself, I'm in a property where I don't have off-road car parking, so to provide a charging point to my vehicle is impossible. in this instance here, if you provide the cabling under the car parking and therefore charging points can be provided adjacent to the parking spaces at the point in the future, that is far more preferable, because you wouldn't be able to have a cable running from each individual apartment going across the car parking spaces.
Exactly. We've got to be looking towards that and planning for this event to happen. If none of us plan for it to happen, it won't happen.
Yeah, so we've looked at future-proof the development in that regard, and the developers have agreed to provide 50% of the parking spaces with electric cables for charging points. So that is a benefit which is over and above what is currently securable under policy. So that's a benefit to the development.
Lovely. Thanks for that, Carwyn.
Okay, we now got Councillor Adams, who wishes to speak. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for upstaging me on those the charging point issue, Nigel. Carwyn, I have to admit that I probably broke the rules because I had a site visit today to this particular application, and it was via the number 26 bus from Blackwood to Cardiff, and we went past quite slowly. I already knew the layout of the site from many visits in the past on Crescent Road, and yes, it's in a sorry state at the moment. How long has it been empty?
I don't know for certain. If I remember correctly, it may well have been United Welsh Housing Association who occupied it some time ago.
Right.
So you're talking, they've been up in Penrose for at least 5 or 6 years. So
at least that.
I suspect this building's been empty for about 10 years. I would have thought.
It's quite a long time, yes, and it's obviously deteriorating. Yeah, it seems an exemplar of a location just off the edge of town centre. Easy walking for most people who may be inhabiting this in the future, and I think it's an excellent brownfield site, Nigel. There we go. So more than willing to support this.
I've already bought my Christmas card for Carwyn. He's having one this year.
There we go then. Okay then. So thanks very much for that. I just thought I'd let you know I'd been to the site today.
Well, site visits are not illegal. Visiting the site is well and justifiably acceptable. Okay, John Taylor, Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to correct Carwyn on a couple of things. First of all, the school is Ysgol y Castell, and it wasn't United Welsh. It was Disability Wales that occupied that building, and they moved to Caerphilly Business Park down Van Road prior to 2001. So we're talking about 20 years that it's been empty, and it was an ugly building when it was in use, and obviously its ugliness has not been enhanced by the length of time that it's been empty. So I think this is a good way of getting rid of an eyesore and having something useful in the location instead.
Yeah, I see that there is a smile on your face, John, so you're obviously happy with it.
Thanks, John.
We got no further indication. Councillor Ridgewell. Come in, John. Councillor John Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I joined the levity here.
Yeah,
one of the things that I like about this is its aspect to the front. It's going to afford those residents with those windows superb views, I think, across the moat and to the castle beyond. So you know, a prime position, quite frankly, and that's what I'm leading to. I didn't notice any balconies, and it did occur to me that balconies would have even enhanced it more. I could just imagine sitting out the front there in an evening, drinking my champagne and looking across at you know I drink champagne, don't you, Nigel?
Yeah.
Looking across at the view. Thanks very much.
You made your application already for one of these flats, then, John, have you?
I certainly have, Chair,
yeah. Well, you haven't moved or seconded it, so we don't even know whether they're going to go ahead. So what's your view, members? Is anybody going to move?
Yeah, I move. We accept.
Happy to move the motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been moved, and there were enough voices there to suggest that it should be seconded as well. No other members wishes to speak before we go to a vote on this then? Okay, so Rebecca, can you put up the vote? The motion is to accept this application. grant permission with conditions. Is that an old
That's just-
hand, John Ridgewell, or not?
Just coming up now, Chair.
Okay,
Old
I
hand,
still see
Chair, apologies
old
again.
hand. Okay.
Yeah.
There we are. There's the voting slip there for you. Yes, no, or abstain. Yes, that you approve. No, that you reject. Okay. Thank you. For or against. You can confirm the vote when you're ready, Rebecca.
Yes, Chair, the vote's in order. That's 11 for, 0 against, 0 abstentions. So the vote is unanimous and that's carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. There we are, Carwyn. You've had a successful night tonight, and I think you've got hopefully a pleasant evening ahead of you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for your assistance.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Now we're going to move on to agenda item 4, which is application 20-0702 full. It's Getliger Gwilt, Ucar Farm, Getliger Engoid, pages 5 to 42. And this is the report that has been referred back to members for reasons for refusal. The notes are there, members. I don't know whether Anthony Pine would like to come in first and make comment.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members and everyone. Yes, as the Chair indicated, I believe this is agenda item 4, 20-0702 full, which is the proposal is to enable the retention of and proposed extension to quarry operations, including new drainage systems and settlement ponds, landscaping bunds, and associated works, and a site restoration scheme at Getliger Gwilt Ucar Farm. The application is being brought back to committee following consideration at the Planning Committee held on the 3rd of November 2021. It was reported with a recommendation of approval. The previous report is attached as an appendix to the preface report. A decision was deferred at the November 3rd committee to allow officers to draft a reason for refusal based on the concerns of members. Members should be aware of correspondence circulated by the committee clerk prior to this meeting in respect of the application. If members are minded to refuse planning permission for this development, as outlined in the preface report before you now, the following reason for refusal is suggested. The proposal would result in a significant expansion of the quarrying operations at the site, which would unacceptably extend the period of mineral operations, as well as the proximity and cumulative impacts of quarrying, especially in terms of noise, dust and air quality, on the local communities, including Getliger and Penryn, to the detriment of the amenity and well-being of residents, contrary to the well-being goal of a healthier Wales, as set out in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015, and it has not been demonstrated that these impacts can be justified by the need for the mineral, given current mineral land banks. The proposal would therefore also be contrary to both Minerals Technical Advice Note Wales 1 aggregates and policy CW2 of the adopted Caerphilly County Borough Local Development Plan up to 2021. As detailed in the attached committee report, members, are advised that there is no evidence or technical support to justify a reason for refusal on the grounds of the impact of quarrying operations on the local community. On this basis, members are advised that a reason for refusal on these grounds is unlikely to be sustained and would likely place the local planning authority at risk of costs being awarded in the event of an appeal. The recommendation as set out in the preface report is that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions as set out in the report provided under Appendix A of Agenda Item 4, noting that this would be subject to confirmation from Welsh Government on the outcome of their holding direction, which was previously advised at the November 3rd committee. However, if members are minded to refuse planning permission, it is suggested they do so on the basis of the reason provided in paragraph 2 of the preface report of Agenda Item 4. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, there was noise over the last few
I can just read that final paragraph if you like, yes.
Okay.
So just to recap, the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to conditions as set out in the report provided under Appendix A of Agenda Item 4, noting that this would be subject to confirmation from Welsh Government on the outcome of their holding direction, as advised at the November 3rd committee. However, if members are minded to refuse planning permission, it is suggested that they do so on the basis of the reason provided in paragraph 2 of the preface report of Agenda Item 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Anthony. So we're looking at the alternative, which is, if I can read that out, is given that the one we're referring to is given the proximity of the Mynydd Eglwysilian Special Landscape Area, site of importance of nature conservation and a designated green wedge, it has not been clearly demonstrated that the benefits of the proposal in terms of need for the mineral resource outweigh the negative impacts on the local environment. As such, the proposal is contrary to both the Minerals Technical Advice Note Wales 1, Aggregates and Policies CW2, CW4, CW5 and CW6 of the adopted Caerphilly County Borough Local Development Plan up to 2012. That's effectively what we're now referring to, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony Pine.
Sorry, Chair. I read out the suggested reason for refusal, which is detailed in the preface report. Yeah. I think you have referenced a different reason, which was put forward by the residents, the objectors' representative in correspondence, which has been sent to members.
Yes.
So that might be something you want to bring up, but that isn't the preface report reason.
Okay. Yeah, it's just that when I spoke to officers earlier today in a meeting, pre-meeting, I was concerned about the length of this particular proposal as worded, and I just felt that it was far too long and not specific enough. And as you said, since then we've received suggestions from the objectors group, and I'm of a mind to ask members whether or not they wish to consider those as alternative reasons for rejection. Councillor Dix.
Yes, Chair. I was looking at the correspondence that we just referred to from the objectors, and I'm sure that the officers have read it through and thought about it deeply. I was just thinking, they make some good points. I think that, what do you think that we could use some of those arguments to beef up the reasons for refusal? What's your view on it? because they go into like sort of future use with the Welsh Assembly not going to build any more roads, etc. And you know, the COP26 conference going on and commitments to be made there, etc. I was just thinking that maybe we could use some of these. I just want the officer's opinion on if we could use some of these arguments put forward by
Ryan,
residents.
you've got your hand up. Could you come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dix. We received, and that was circulated, was an extract from an email from Phil Williams, who spoke on behalf of residents at the last meeting. He's presented 3 potential reasons for refusal for members. The first one is very similar to that presented by officers in the report, except officers have indicated that the impacts upon the amenity of neighbours, of the residents, wouldn't be justified given the land bank of minerals. So, but in officers' opinion, as is reproduced in the report, there's no evidence to support those impacts, and indeed, you know, the site has been monitored, you know, quite significantly since it was operated, and there's a fair amount of data which indicates that those impacts just can't be justified. So in terms of a reason for refusal. So again, you know, officers would not recommend that reason could be sustained at appeal, and again, we may well be exposed to costs on the basis that there is no evidence. Now, the second reason is one which wasn't really debated at the meeting by members last time, but it may be something the members wish to consider at this stage, and that referred to the impact upon the special landscape area and the sink and the designated green wedge. Now, many of these impacts are often subjective in terms of you know, people's consideration of them. So you know, that again, if members want to consider that and debate that as a potential reason, then whilst officers do not consider, again, that to be justified as a reason for refusal, there isn't the technical data behind it, and it will be a matter of debate as to whether or not that was a justifiable reason for refusal. The final reason talks about the lack of information given the conditions and so on in terms of the impacts. Well, it's clear what the impacts are at the moment. It's already operating. The application seeks to extend that period. As I said, we've monitored the site you know, across a range of sort of impacts for a considerable period of time. So it wouldn't be reasonable, I don't think, to argue that we haven't got sufficient information to assess this. We've got the information, and indeed the conditions that have been asked for have been asked for by the experts, if I want to a better word, so by our technical advisors. They've got all the information they wish, they need. And this is just the fine detail, the fine grain in terms of all the monitoring sort of processes in place. So again, we wouldn't, you know, as officers, we wouldn't recommend that as a reason. So of the 3, you know, reason 2, it probably would expose the authority to less risk of costs on appeal in terms of the sort of impact upon the landscape. But again, it's not something which we consider we could sustain. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
just one question on that, Ryan. Was the one on the COP26 where the Welsh Assembly looking to reduce the amount of construction in Wales, i.e. particularly roads where we do use a lot of aggregates in forming roads. I don't know whether, would that be a reason that we could use in this case?
Well, that could be something which is used. I mean, in both the reason that officers have provided and reason 2, as presented by Mr. Williams, references made to the need for the mineral, not outweighing the impacts. So clearly, that may well be something which could be used as an argument in any debate of the matter. It's not a strong point, I don't think, because there is a need, an acknowledged need, given the quality of the mineral produced here. nationally. But again, that's something which can be put into the mix in terms of an argument.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks,
That's
Boyd.
very
Thank you for
helpful. Yeah. I've got a number of speakers here. I got Councillor Adams, then Councillor Ridgewell. If you'd like to come in next, Mike. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And you may as well stay on there, Ryan, because a couple of technical questions here. You'll be aware that members have had quite a few contacts with some of the speakers from last week, including Mr. Williams, who was not actually added to anything that he said to us last week, except asking us to go beyond the one refusal paragraph that we've had quoted and expand that quite widely. So I think we were all aware of those reasons anyway, because they were generally in the report. And also we've had another one from somebody who didn't speak or contribute last week, Mrs. Muxworthy. I don't know whether we should be taking as much notice. I have read it all for when she looks at the recording of tonight. And yes, she makes all of the similar points and very, very well written and exposing all of the things that her residents and community are claiming that they're exposed to on a daily basis and for many years and for many more years to come if we approve all of this. So those are being taken into account, I'm sure, by all members. But should we be taking that much notice of a new contributor now that we're at the reasons for refusal stage? Also, I did respond to one of the contributors, I think last week, who thanked me for some of the comments I made about, do we need now all of this road building material in Wales following the announcements that we've had? But you've said, yeah, we might not need it in Wales, but it's certainly a very national resource that is highly valued for its usage. So it isn't only in Wales that we might say we don't need this for. And also for the people of Lambeda, who were shown on a television report last week, being very, very disappointed about the fact that their new bypass has now been scotched. We can disappoint many communities by saying this now won't be available perhaps in Wales for you. And you know, we're torn, you're twixt and between what you'd like to do for those people in on your doorstep and those perhaps who haven't got a quarry anywhere near them. So it's not an easy way to go forward. The last point is this has come back to us in just a week after we took the decision, which surprised me. Perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised. Whereas some of the comments made, we may have had some answers from either Welsh Government to confirm that the quarry materials we won't be needing in Wales, or some of the AMs who expressed an opinion last week didn't go back and say, hey, is this right? And so many things. So it's not an easy decision to come back to, although we had the one well-stated reason last week. So I'll wait for more questions and some of the replies that we have. Thanks all.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Adams. Where we appear to be at the moment then, and following advice that we've had from the officers, is that the item, the number 2 on the list of suggested reasons for refusal that we've been handed that's been handed over to us, appears to be the one that we can strongly defend if we were challenged on this in terms of an appeal. And I always tend to think that if this is going to be appealed against and we have to defend it, you don't present weaker reasons which can be targeted. I know I've seen too many Perry Mason films to know that when you're in court, they don't look at what you can particularly defend. They look where they can attack you. and if we are presenting reasons that we can't substantiate in any way, shape or form, then this is going to make the case more difficult to defend. So I am of the opinion that the suggestion that is given in the list that we've had, which is number 2, is the one that is the much stronger case to defend if members wish to continue with the line of refusing this application. But I have got other speakers first. I've got Councillor John Ridgewell first, and then Councillor Mike Davis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I read Mrs. Maxworthy's letter with interest, but I also spent a lot of time going through the applicant's letter, which we received in the bundle as well. I think this relates largely, I think, to the point that you've just made, Chair, with regard to number 2 of the options that we were looking at in terms of reasons for refusal. In his letter, it's not page numbered, so I think it's page 3, and it's the first major paragraph on page 3, I think. He's talking about MTAN 1, and it's stated in there that granting extensions to quarries where there is already an adequate land bank, excuse me, may be justified where the supply of aggregate of a particular specification is clearly demonstrated. And I think the key words in that are maybe and also clearly demonstrated. And the maybe, I think, is the one I want to focus on first of all, because this is a huge maybe. The fact is, this aggregate's not going to go away. It's been there for millions of years, and it'll be there for millions of years afterwards. So in terms of accessing it, it's always going to be available should it be required. At the moment, though, the evidence doesn't demonstrate it needs to be required now, and that's the key point, isn't it? There's no evidence that it needs to be required now. So I think when we're looking at this, we want to bear that in mind and have a focus on that. It's not a loss, it's going to still be there. And if in 20 years' time circumstances change and it's required to be excavated out, it can happen, and maybe, you know, that'll be acceptable then. But this juncture, we've all come to the conclusion that it isn't, and it isn't because of the impact it's going to have on the residents and on the local environment. So I think that comes back down to where we started on this, which was in fact the reasons for refusal. And I'm prepared to put forward that we use the and I'll quote it again if you don't mind. I've just got to get the thing up. Okay, that we actually use the statement that says, given the proximity of the Mount Egosilian Special Landscape Area, SINC, Site of Importance of Nature Conservation, and the designated green wedge has not been clearly demonstrated. The benefits of the proposal in terms of a need for mineral resources outweighs the negative impact on the local environment. As such, the proposal is contrary to both the Minerals Technical Advice Note Wales 1, Aggregates and Policies CW2, CW4, CW5 and CW6 of the adopted Caerphilly County Borough Local Development Plan. So I put that forward as a motion, and I think that is what I suggest that we use as the reasons for refusal tonight, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ridgewell. I don't know whether anybody wishes to second that from members present.
I'll second that, Chair.
It's been seconded. Is that Councillor Mike Davis?
It is indeed, yeah. Okay,
thank you, Mike. And I see you've got your hand up as well, so you can now come in with your contribution as well, if you wish.
Right, thank you, Chair. I just... oh, the camera's gone off a sec. I just wanted to say that we hear all the time about the advice from officers, and in most cases they are correct in what they're saying, but of course we know they aren't always right. As we know, we've got a case live just down the road in NSD. However, with cases like this, we got to look at perhaps people power isn't right, but certainly yourself, Councillor Sir Alice, will most probably remember a long time ago there was a firm called Tarmac Adam that wanted to quarry high quality blue pennant from Merritt Mine down to the South Cullenan site in Abercarn. Neil Kinnock, gosh, how long ago it was involved then, and all of planning was seriously to move that forward. It was refused for good reasons, and I know planning has moved on since then with rules, legislation and laws, but sometimes we have to think outside the box and protect the people we serve as well. And that is why I'm very happy to second Councillor Ridgewell in his proposal. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Councillor John Taylor. Oh, sorry, Ryan, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, yes, just to clarify on that reason for refusal, and some of the policies referenced in the letter from Mr. Williams don't relate to the special landscape area, the sink or the green wedge. So we would need to tweak those policies to reflect policy CW4, NH1 and SI1. So just clarifying that we need to just tweak those policies to ensure that they relate specifically to those impacts.
Okay, so at the end, if I can ask you to give us a definitive statement, if that would be okay. But I think members know where they're heading with this anyway. But Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering whether perhaps Councillor Ridgewell and Councillor Davis would accept into their motion that the reason for refusal that our officers have drawn up as well as the one that Mr. Williams has suggested on his number 2 about the special landscape area and the sink and so on, because I think that would be it would be a bit stronger if we had the 2 reasons, even if our officers don't think that the reason they've come up with is all that strong. I think I think that having the 2 reasons would be better, and I wonder whether Councillor Ridgewell and Councillor Davis would consider incorporating that into their motion.
Can I just make a comment before I ask them to answer you on that? You know, as I mentioned earlier, I think that if you're going to defend the case, you don't put anything forward that they can attack you on, and we are likely to end up here in an appeal. And you know, if we have a strong argument on one issue, I think it is more defensible than having to argue a case for a much weaker one. It's just an opinion, John. I'm not dismissing your comments in any way, but it's just the way that I feel. You know, you can't defend the indefensible. You know, you open up some vulnerability if you've got one item that you put in forward that can be fairly strongly defended, and another one that's much weaker. But there we are. But you've asked those members whether or not they want to add that or not. So we go back to Councillor John Ridgewell for an answer on that. And perhaps as well, before we do that, though, can Ryan, you can come back in just for a moment.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of build on the comment that you made, the issue with the reason that officers have put forward is that it relies on evidence and technical data, which clearly shows to the contrary. So it's not a subjective view there. It'd be an inspector would consider the evidence before him or her, and that evidence would clearly show that those impacts are not justified. So that would, as the chairman has indicated, that would be a weak reason which we would have to defend, and would probably expose us to a greater risk of costs of appeal. So in this case, I don't think more may mean less, really, in terms of being able to defend a case.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ryan, for that. We'll go to Councillor John Ridgewell now, just because he's been questioned as to whether or not he is prepared to accept that within his motion. Councillor Ridgewell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do understand Councillor Taylor's view, and I certainly feel a sympathy with that. There is a kind of all our eggs in one basket issue with just going with this one. But having given a lot of thought to this in the intervening period here, it does seem to me that in fact our planning officer's advice is the most sound advice on this, in that if we put forward proposals which in fact can be then dismantled or challenged, then it does kind of diminish the overall impact that we've got. If we stand firm on one particular point, and that point can be defended, and I believe it can be defended strongly, then I think that's adequate for us to get through. It's not that I don't want to do more, it's I want to make sure that what we do has the result which I think is most important to all of us. So I thank Councillor Taylor for his observations on that, but the view I have is that I think it's still the best method for us is to go with the one statement and the statement that I read out. So I hope you accept that explanation, John.
I'll accept that, Councillor Ridgewell.
Okay, so you're withdrawing your suggestion to the mover and the seconder to accommodate.
Well, my suggestion was they consider it, and by the sound of it, Councillor Ridgewell has considered it and decided against. So I'll accept that.
Okay, and Councillor Mike Davis, you've got your hand up, so I don't know what your views on because you've seconded that original motion.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was only to say really that it was a good call from Councillor Taylor, because it did seem logical to beef it up. But listening to Mr. Thomas, the officer seems to be very confident with his advice, and so I'm happy to second John Ridgewell as original.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I've now got Councillor Mike Adams, Councillor Aldworth with their hands up. Councillor Mike Adams.
Thank you once again, Chair. I just want to come back to a few of the points that we certainly discussed last week, and Mr. Thomas has referred in different ways to them tonight. The number of conditions that we thought were too qualified in being put to the members as having to be done within 3 months. Now, many of those could, of course, be available within a week or two of us saying yes. And Mr. Thomas, of course, reminded us this is technical information in many instances, and things which we, as officers of the council, thought were absolutely necessary to be included if it goes ahead. And we've also heard in discussions that if it goes to appeal because we refused, many of those important conditions that we believe are essential might be left out of the final decision. And we're left with just carrying on with the existing conditions that we have, but will they be superseded then by being ruled out for future use of and extraction? There's so many different things. We also, of course, last week had the option of saying yes to this and it being called in by Welsh Government. If it had been called in after we'd said yes, and they had then confirmed that approval, I think, in my mind, it's a great flag saying we would have said yes anyway, even if it had gone the other way. So it really is quite complicated in getting the best right thing for our community, which is what this is all about. That's why it's come to the committee. It hasn't been just delegated powers, because we know that there are many, many other things involved. And that's where the involvement of our local members for this area has come to bear. And we've had much impact of what happens to their community and eventually them as we go forward. So I'd probably be happy to support the current motion, but it will be, again, with a heavy heart. Thanks all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Adams. We've got Councillor Aldworth, and Mike Davis, your hand is still up. If you leave it up, I'll call you back in. Otherwise, obviously, if it's an old hand, please take it down. Councillor Aldworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we've come back in a week, which is pretty quick. In the past, it's taken a bit longer when we've been in the chamber and that, but this has come back quite quickly. But I fully support the 3 reasons plus the officer's report as well. The reason for not going along with this proposal. But saying that, if we go along with the one that appertains to Mynydd Eglwysillon, our local members and other persons affected by this application, could they send representations themselves at this juncture to the Welsh Assembly, to the address of the letter that was sent to this council? Can they make representations at this stage in regard to this, please?
Ryan, actually your hand is up. Can you come in and answer Councillor Aldworth on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, the call in direction related to a scenario when if we were to grant planning permission at this committee. The motion before us now is to refuse for this reason. So I fully anticipate that this will be subject to an appeal, and at that point, members and the local community will have the opportunity to put their views forward on any issue. So the inspector will consider the application, will consider our reason for refusal, but we'll have to take into account all material planning considerations as part of that decision-making process. So yes, in answer to your question, we wouldn't comment on the calling direction, but there would be an opportunity to make comments in due course. And of course, if this application is refused tonight for this reason, we will need a member of the committee to defend that decision at the inquiry or at the appeal, should an appeal be lodged. So we will need somebody to put the name forward.
2 members, in actual fact, is it, Ryan? 1 or 2 members?
2.
Well, at least 1. But again, if more than 1 member is prepared to provide that evidence, then all well and good.
Okay.
When you say the appeal and then you say inquiry, do you think that it would be an inquiry like the one I attended some years ago, that they actually came and they had like a sort of judge conducting the appeal? Would an inquiry be of that status, in this particular instance with this application, Ryan? Barristers and that involved.
Sure. Through you then, Chair. Yes, I mean there are 3 main mechanisms for determining an appeal. One is the written representations, which is effectively an exchange of correspondence. One is a hearing, and the final one is an inquiry. Now it's up to the inspector really to decide which process is followed. The inspectorate. But for an application of this magnitude, and given the strength of opposition from the local community, I would anticipate that this would be heard as an inquiry, and it would be in that format with an inspector or inspectors considering the merits from both sides, basically. It may or may not involve barristers, depending on the case, but it's likely to be that scenario.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Sounds very threatening. Thank you very much, Ryan. Right, I don't have any more indication, but we do have a motion on the floor to accept the condition 2 that's been presented to us. Would you like to go through the wording of that, Ryan, so that we can actually vote on what you consider to be the accurate wording?
Okay, thank you, Chair. It'll be more or less the wording as presented, but subject to amendments to some of the policies, because the policies don't specifically relate to those issues. So it will be given the proximity of the Mynydd Eglwys Island Special Landscape Area, site of importance for nature conservation, and a designated green wedge. It has not been clearly demonstrated that the benefits of the proposal, in terms of the need for the mineral resource, outweigh the negative impacts on the local environment. As such, the proposal is contrary to both the Minerals Technical Advice Note Wales 1 aggregates and policies CW4, NH1 and SI1 of the adopted Caerphilly County Borough Local Development Plan up to 2021.
Thank you, Ryan. Right, so that is what's before us, members. Nigel, before we vote, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Chair, obviously before we go into battle, I would argue it's sensible to know who's going to go into battle for us. Is there a hearing? So it would be the members who would put themselves forward to take part in that hearing.
Well,
that's what I was just curious
yeah,
of.
in terms of process, Hugo, isn't it first necessary to find out whether or not we're going to move that as a reason for refusal? I mean, it may be that it's not refused, in which case we're in a different scenario entirely. So once we get this decision taken on whether we support this reason of refusal, until then, we can't decide whether it's something that we can move forward on. If we do move forward on it, then we've got to select people to represent us. So we won't close the meeting until we've got people to represent us.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to ask for the vote to come forward now. Then it's for adopting the second proposal that have been presented to us, that's been given by Mr. Thomas just a few moments ago. I'm going to ask members whether they are in favour of that as being the reason for refusal or not. Can you put the voting slip up, please?
Just finalising our, Chair, if you give us one moment, please.
Okay. So we would be supporting or rejecting the refusal on these grounds.
Here we go, Chair.
Okay. Members are quite clear which way we're now voting. It's either for the reason for refusal that's been presented, or against, or you wish to abstain.
Just checking our vote for you, Chair. Sorry, Chair, just give us one moment, please. Right, thank you, Chair. So you have 9 voted for, 1 voted against, no abstentions. So that motion is carried by majority, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. Now, in order to defend ourselves in case we are challenged on this, Robert, I see your hand is up. Please come in and give us some advice.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just draw your attention, members, to the planning code that we have. That says that we would be looking for at least 2 members to defend this appeal, and those members are normally the proposer and seconder of the reason for refusal. But we would be looking for at least 2 members to come to any subsequent inquiry. And I agree with Ryan. I think because of the amount of public interest in this one, this will, COVID permitting, almost certainly be by way of inquiry.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert. Now, Councillor Ridgewell, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chair. I would happily put my name forward to speak on this at any inquiry. However, for those of you who may not be aware of this, I don't intend to stand at the next election. I am going to retire as I've reached the age of 27, and I think it's about time I did. So I'm not sure where that actually leaves me. Knowing how these things work, the likelihood of this coming to a public inquiry or a local inquiry, I suspect it will probably be before then, I think is remote. So I think that probably rules me out of this particular instance. Advice on that would be handy from Mr. Tranter or who else.
Could you come in with advice then, Mr. Tranter?
Yes, I'll try my best, Chair. It might be, look, to that Councillor Ridgewell could put himself forward, but let's say it's after May, then clearly he's no longer a member. So we will have, just by way of assurance, really, an insurance, if we could maybe have 3 members to put their names forward to defend this appeal. I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah. Bearing that in mind, I don't disagree with you, Mr. Tranter, but bearing that in mind, there is likely to be an election in between. We might not end up with any members of this committee, you know, in the council. So if that is the case, I mean, where would we be going then? What would be happening? What would be the course of action?
In that scenario, Chair, it would be the Chair and Vice Chair of the new Planning Committee, I suggest.
Okay.
Would be the individuals who would, I was going to say have to walk the plank, but I shouldn't say that. Would need to represent the council at any appeal.
So the space is open for somebody to put their names forward as the next chair of planning. I see. Okay. Right. Well, thank you, John, for putting your name forward. I mean, we'll accept that if that's okay, in the view that it may happen before the May elections, but assuming that it's likely to be after. You've heard the advice from Mr. Tranter as to it generally being the move in the seconder. I don't know whether Councillor Mike Davis is happy at this stage to put his name forward as well. And if he is, I'm prepared as well, unless there's another volunteer to. Oh, Mike, you've flashed up there.
Yeah, it's just to say that I'm. Oh, sorry, wrong.
So on. Yeah, no, Mike, come in first, Mike.
All the members know there was one who voted against this particular motion to refuse. It was myself.
Yeah.
And if any member wants to come back to me to discuss that, happy to do so.
Yeah, it's not necessary to make that declaration because that is going to be in the public domain anyway, Councillor Adams. But
yeah,
Councillor Mike Davis,
members to know tonight.
Okay, Councillor Mike Davis.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm happy, but I will walk the plank and not as Peter Pan, I'm afraid.
Okay. And Councillor Allsworth, you've got your hand up. Councillor Aldworth?
Sorry, yes, you can put my name forward,
Right.
you know, up until next May, at least. Yeah, don't know any different to that, but yeah, it's okay.
So we've got 3, and you can add my name as well as a 4th, because I think more than 2 is likely to be a more healthy situation if the challenge comes through. Okay, that's great. I still got hands up here. I don't know whether they're old hands. Councillor Aldworth, do you want to come back in? No? No,
thank you,
take your
Chair.
hand down. Okay,
Yeah.
Councillor Adams, you got your hand up again. Is that going to come?
No, it actually was a legacy hand, but
right. Okay.
I would say, if needed, although I voted against this proposal tonight, I would be happy, if needed, to go and defend the decision of the majority.
Okay.
I can see where it generates from.
Is that a healthy situation, Mr. Tranter?
No offence to Councillor Adams, probably not, Chair.
No, I thought
probably not. I would think that any advocate may have a field day if Councillor Adams had to give evidence on that. So that's probably not a sensible proposal at this stage.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for the offer then, Councillor Adams, but I don't think it's going to be accepted by this committee, unfortunately. And I've got John Ridgewell's hand still up. Is that a legacy hand?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that before this turned into a chorus line, I'm quite happy to trip the light fantastic with as many people as you like, subject to me still being here.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Right. Okay. So the decision is made. I don't think there's anything further to add tonight. If that's the case, thank you very much tonight for your attendance and your help and your contributions. The decisions have been reached on all 3 items. I wish you well. Have a good weekend ahead of you. Okay. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, members. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.